Hey, how we doing? This is Lauren Green here, and it's going to take you through a couple of options we came up with to help you collect RPE from your athletes and keep it in an organized fashion in a way that will help you be able to look back over time during this return to play and help you kind of keep a good idea of where your athletes are at day to day and if they're matching along with what you anticipate for your return for the athletes and their loading or volume, if you will, moving forward. So what we've done is created an Excel sheet or Excel workbook, excuse me, that should help you organize and visualize that information so that, again, you can monitor over time what your athletes are kind of experiencing and going through. And so what we've done here, this is a sample version that has some data already inputted in it so you can see what the graph will look like. And so in the top part here, we have the athlete or the person selected. And this list is going to grow depending on which athlete's names you put into the athlete bar. Then we'll get into the data input in a second. And also starting from a date. So essentially, whatever date you choose is going to be the beginning of a month's worth of time. It's about 28 days, excuse me, about 4 weeks worth of time that will show up on this calendar or on this graph here, excuse me. So, you know, whatever date I choose here, it's going to show me that date and the 28 days following after that. At the bottom, you have the RPE score itself in blue of the athlete that's selected again in this cell. The orange is going to show the average for the team on that day, and then the gray is going to show the coach's response or their anticipated number for that day. So again, the bottom part is going to be the 0 to 10, or excuse me, the 1 to 10 scale for that day, player versus team versus coach. The top scale here is going to have their actual load volume score, if you will, but that's the RP score multiplied by the duration to get that arbitrary number of player load. So this one again does account for the duration. You notice here over time we have these kind of percentage scores. What this percentage score is, it's saying on that date and the 7 days prior to it, what was the average? So 6 days prior to it, so 7 days total. And on that date and the 28 days encompassing that date prior to it, what was the average? And if we take the 7-day average and the 28-day average and we divide those, we get what we consider to be our acute or chronic ratio, or some might call it a stress balance, so training stress balance between those. So what we want to do is hopefully keep that under 120% and over 80%, and that'll keep us in a good level of training based off of the estimation of their scores. Again, just helps us really understand, are we going a bit too hard or not hard enough in progressing along. So again, for many of these dates, again, the 28-day average here is representative of the average of all these days leading up to it. The 7-day average here is representative of the 7 days leading up to that date. And then that's our training stress balance for that day now is 104%. So again, think of it as if you go over 100%, we're essentially in a training or in a building state. And if we're under 100%, we might be in maintenance. And if you get below 80, we might be in a detraining or a stepping back or unloading type of phase. So going through the different ways in which we can collect this from information from the athletes, we've gone to 2 different ways. One is just adding a print sheet to this file. So on here, you can just take this and print it out like you would anything else off of Excel, and now you have the ability to write down the date, write down the duration of the session, show the athletes the scale so they have something visually to recognize and be consistent off of, and again, write down the athlete's name. We added this group section here. If for whatever reason you choose to put them in groups, maybe that's varsity, junior varsity, fresh sophomore, or maybe it's just group training groups 1 through whatever, because you have them in separate groups, maybe you had a separate training plan for those groups, you can go ahead and account for that there. And then again, the number that they give you. So this is probably going to be the easiest and fastest way for some of you. But then there's also another way, depending on your environment. Some of you might utilize some of these athlete management or strength conditioning softwares and apps that are out there. But another way you can do that for free and a very similar fashion is to use Google Forms. And so with Google Forms, we essentially have the ability to create a similar type of application, again, that's free on Google Forms platform. And we can have something that looks similar to this. So essentially have our athletes' names, the date of the activity, the group they were in, and then also, again, have that scale in there so they can answer. And so what we do here is once we create that form, we can now share the link to that form with the athletes, and they'll see just this, a nice clean format where they can choose their name, the date of the activity, the group they were in if you use that. And then also now they have their scale and the reminder there so they can give you their input. Again, pretty simple way to do that if that works best for you. And to create that sheet, we can do it in a pretty simple manner here. I'm going to go ahead and just start over from scratch, and you see how easy it is to go ahead and get to that point. And you're wondering, why would I go ahead and have that created and deleted again? So essentially what we do here is we went to google.com, go to Google Forms, and if you open up the just make new form, it will show you a default. Essentially it'll look like this. It'll say untitled section or untitled piece here. We can go ahead and name this RPE responses. They titled it, and what I like to do here is add a couple sections, and then again that helps us put the athlete in a position to succeed, in the sense that now we can make sure they have the right information that we need there. So first might be the athlete's name. And again, I like to make this into a drop down that I'll already put in the athlete's names here. And that way we don't end up with a Dominique Smith and a Dom Smith, or a Michelle Jackson and Missy Jackson, whatever, nicknames and things. This way, it's always going to be the appropriate person's name that you have saved in your database, as it were. We'll go ahead and add a date range here, which is really nice because they give you just a date part here. It makes it simple. Nothing special there. And I'm going to go ahead and make these required responses. And again, that'll make sure I don't have any empty data that's waiting around. And then lastly, again, if you choose to use a group, we can have that group here as well. And I'll make that a drop down just for simplistic reasons. And I'll make that required. So now here in the second section, we'll just put in our RPE score response. And I'll add a question here. All we need to do is add one question, and we're going to make this one a linear scale. So that one right here in the middle. And what that'll do is it already knows it's going to be a scale, a numerical scale from 1 to something. 1 to 10 makes it super easy. And we'll say, a 1 was very easy, and exhausting for a 10. So now that we have that there, we can also do this nice little trick here, and we see that photo icon. I can now go ahead and put in that image of my RPE scale. And now again, I'll have that set up just for the athlete to go ahead and have that reference for themselves there, so they can remind every time they see that. Get that a title. I want to make sure each of those questions has a title, because what this will give us the ability to do now is if I go to responses, obviously we haven't put any responses in yet, but I can determine where these responses go. And so by clicking to go ahead and make that into a new response score, sorry, I added in duplicates to this because I already had it made. But you see it comes up in that order. So what it'll do is it'll give it a timestamp of that response, the athlete's name, the date, the group they're in, and their RPE score. Again, makes it very nice because it'll go ahead and automatically save that for us. So if I was to go ahead and do a demo version of this, and I give you the athlete's name, we do it for today's date, and I'll say they're part of that group 1. And again, I can go ahead and choose my effort. Let's just say it was a 7 today. I'll respond with a 7 and submit, and now it can be found over in those responses. So now you see it here. Athlete 1 responded for a session on 6/14, gave us an RP of 7. The really nice part about this is once I have this done, and if I decide to use this route, I can just copy and paste from here on Google Sheets and take it back over to my database here in my Excel file. And just go ahead and paste those in here. And so again, it'll already be in order of athlete name, date, the group if I chose that, and the RPE. And then I can go ahead and put in the duration for that session, and it'll give me my total here on that end. The reason I suggest we don't put the duration on the Google form is because you don't want, again, the athletes to give you another different value than what you might have done. Again, you're the coach, you know what it is. The coach or the athlete might have lost track of time or whatever else, or might just guess, and you have different values when you know it was an hour practice or a 2-hour practice, whatever else. So again, that's one way to do it. Or if you use the printout sheet, you can go ahead and just submit it onto here. The nice thing here that we made for you is that all you need to do as the coach is put in on this top row, put in the date of the training session. I've got it set for today of June 14th, and then I can put in my RPE anticipated for that session, and the duration of the session, we'll say it was a nice hard session at a 7 for 120 minutes. So the duration here, as you can see, it's done in minutes. Your RPE should be a 1 to 10 single digit number, or should be just a whole number, and the date in a month, day, and year format. Once again I have that, I can go ahead and put in the athletes' names. Actually, I think I have them listed as athletes. So as you notice here on this list is going to update to whatever names you put in. So if you added a new name, a new athlete that may not have been there, sessions 1 through whatever, it'll automatically populate onto this list. So I'd put in athletes 1 through 5 already. I'm going to put in athlete 2 here, athlete 3. Right, and as you see, the date automatically fills in. Again, if you choose to use a group, great. The duration will automatically fill in from the coaches. So all I need to do when I'm putting in the athletes' responses is just the athlete's name, group if they have it, and then their response. So we'll just say 1 was an 8, and then athlete 2 will give us 7, same as coach, and athlete 3 will give us a 6. And as you notice here, again, it fills in their load automatically, and then also I have the team average for RPE and for total load for that day. And if I go ahead and hit save, it's going to take that data, add it to our database now, and then you'll notice that the graph automatically will update to make the last date whatever the date I submitted on here, and it also clears my table so I can add more data or just know that it has been submitted properly. So notice that there was no data put in from the 9th to the 14th, so it shows what I just added in there, and it defaults to showing all the entire group. And if let's say I want to see athlete 2, it will now filter for athlete 2, or if I do it for athlete 1, it'll update for athlete 1, and so on. Or I can look at my responses as the coach over that time, and it'll show me my responses. And again, notice that the blue is the response for the person selected in that field. The orange is the team average. The gray is the coach's response for that day. And then again, these are the raw RPE numbers. So again, gives a nice little snapshot here. One thing I do want to point out and notice, I want you to notice is, again, that when whatever I submit that form, those dates on there, that's what it's going to default to on the screen. And so if I wanted to look at a different date, again, I would want to look at a month of time. So if I go back, let's say to March 15th, it's now going to give me that date again, starting at March 15th and showing the month after that date. And so again, it allows us to see that visual over time and those responses. What you will have when you do your sheet in the beginning, obviously it's blank, there's no data in there. I had that filled with old data on its own. So what you'll notice is that it's blank in the beginning, nothing there to show. And as you put in information, again, our date will fill in automatically. I don't have a group form. I'll go ahead and just enter in some blank responses. Our averages is there. Everything's all the same. And as I collect, it'll do its thing here, clears that out. And now you notice that date is now the last one on here and shows the responses there. So as you start to fill yours in, this yellow line won't have anything on there because it, again, needs that 7 and 28-day average. So once you get up to a month's worth of data, this line will now start to show you those values going along there. And then same thing for the 7-day average, it'll show you those values. And this will just show you data along the line there. So hopefully this should work as a nice, easy, simple tool for you to use to be able to look at your players over time. And again, once you add athletes in, it'll put their names into that drop-down list there for you. Oh, and lastly, I wanted to go show you this RP database tab here. This is where that information goes. So for whatever reason, if you needed to delete or you add in an improper value or something there, you could go ahead, if you knew exactly what it was. Let's say athlete 3 was actually supposed to be an 8, you can go ahead and change it. Or let's say athlete 3 actually gave you some false information, or you accidentally put that athlete in there and they didn't actually perform. I'd go ahead and just delete that row and it'll update itself. Now we're all good, and then nothing's broken, no problems there. So should be pretty simple to control your information, be able to see it, see what the athletes are doing, and have a good view of their responses over time. And I hope this was a helpful tool for you, and you're able to do a great job taking care of your athletes.